On incredibly short notice, we have Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. Mr. Billy, thank you so much for joining us on, like I said, such short notice. Greatly appreciated, sir.
Always glad to talk to you. How y'all doing this morning?
We're good. You know, a week or two ago, you sprang this idea on us. I'm not sure if it was the first time you said it. It was the first time I heard it about turning the French Quarter into a state park.
How do you do that?
Were you drinking?
Well, you know, for 30 years we've been talking about cleaning up the French Quarter, getting crime under control, and it just hasn't happened. And so goes New Orleans, as we saw after Katrina. It affects tourism in the rest of the state. And every year we hold our breath and hope it gets better, and it hasn't.
So what's the process for What's the process for that?
We got to think outside the box.
What's the process for that? How do you do that?
Well, we'd have to have a cooperative endeavor agreement, maybe some legislation in Baton Rouge. But I figured we would start the conversation because there's not enough voters in the French Quarter to ever get the city of New Orleans to really pay attention to it. But if we made it a state park and put a ranger on every corner, we'd have enough police in there to make it safe. And we would put a plan together to fix the streets and sidewalks so visitors wasn't tripping and falling in the street every time they ventured out into the French Quarter. But, you know, if it's not the right thing to do, we don't want to do it. But we've got to look at ways to do something differently. You know, 30 years we've been talking about it, hoping there's not enough crime to hurt tourism, and it doesn't seem to be working. So we're looking for any other option to make this draw for tourism safer and a little bit nicer for visitors when they come here.
When we spoke last time, you told us that you had spoken to folks in New Orleans about the possibility, about this idea of making the French Quarter a state park. Can you tell us who you talked to? Was it city officials? Was it private business people? Did you approach them, or did they approach you?
Well, I approached the residents and spoke to the residents community of the French Quarter first. Then most recently the business community, and I spoke to the councilwoman who took office yesterday in that district, and I mentioned it to the incoming mayor that I would like to have the conversation with her, looking at the tax base that comes into the quarter. We could probably operate and run the quarter for a portion of that and give the rest of that base to the city to do what they want. It's a simple solution. You just got to put the assets in the quarter because it's worth cleaning up. But when you're a councilwoman for the Algiers community, and that's where your voter base is, where are you going to fix streets? Where are you going to put the police? Where your voters are. So that's why it's not happening as a city effort, because of the lack of voters in the French Quarter.
Billy, do you mean French Quarter from Canal Street all the way down through St. Louis Cathedral? You mean the whole area, or do you mean the riverfront, or do you mean?
No, I think you look at the whole historical French Quarter that draws tourists. You know, we can have discussions about where the boundaries are, and look, this is just. I don't want this to happen unless it's a win-win for everyone. The tourists, the city, Louisiana residents. But just like we did with the foundation to start funding our state parks, we've got to think outside the box. And when we're doing the same thing over and over and it's not working, we've got to go in a different direction. And no idea is a bad idea until we completely vent it.
You said you had spoken to the mayor. You said you had new Mayor Cantrell. You said you kind of broached this subject with her. What was her response? What she
what'd she think?
Great idea, or whoa? Is this a power grab by the lieutenant governor?
Well, I think she's open to any ideas. Look, the mayor. I've got high hopes for the mayor. I was a citizen rescuing people after Katrina. She was helping her church in New Orleans East. And when you give me somebody in public office that helped people before they were elected, you know they care about people. And so, you know, I believe if it's for the greater good of the state, I don't think she has an ego to be in control of the French Quarter. If we can do it and clean it up and make it safer, I think she'd be open to the idea. she seemed to be when I mentioned it to her, and I look forward to sitting down with her in the near future to discuss it further.
See, Erin said that what I'm about to mention to you, she said, this is just one of my little tinfoil hat theories. Mayor Cantrell ran on one of the cornerstones of her campaign was a $15 an hour minimum wage. My theory was she's probably going to be able to get that passed given the political makeup of the city. I was thinking that all these French Quarter guys had come to you, all these business people in New Orleans, and said, you know, is there anything you can do that might be able to slow that down, to drive a wedge, to keep that from happening in specifically the French Quarter and hurting businesses and hurting tourism? Is there anything to that? Or am I just putting the tinfoil hat on? Am I a little crazy, man?
Well, you know, I do remember those conversations during the campaign, and I think, you know, business leaders, restaurant owners, and I'd surely be glad to help in any way, to sit down and think this thing all the way through and look at the effects of raising it that much in a short period of time, what it would do to some of these businesses. So, you know, I haven't heard. Of course, she just took office yesterday. We'll have to wait and see if that's a hot agenda item for her right out the gates, or if that's something long term. But we'll surely stay on top of it and have those discussions with her.